So this is an open career symposium, and we are three dudes who are going to pontificate with you and for you. So the idea here, everybody, is if you want to ask a question, feel free to unmute, feel free to send it in chat. If you aren't comfortable, we're going to cover a few things like generalist, specialist, manager, and some others. But if you have questions, that's why we're here. But let's start with a little bit about who we are and maybe why you should listen to us. Start with Michael.
Nobody wants to listen to me. All right. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or I don't even know where I am anymore. My name is Michael Fleischer. I am a staff solution engineer with VMware. I've been here for 3.5 years now. And let me just call right off the bat, I am currently fighting COVID, so we're going to get through this together. So if I have a little bit of a nasal thing, apologies. But a little bit about me. So I started my foray into the tech world as a very young child. I've always been a nerd. I think I wanted to be a doctor at one point. I think I wanted to design roller coasters at another point, but technology has always been the basis of me. And I kind of found my way into where I am now just by happenstance, really. So first of all, got a degree in computer engineering, which is computer science and electrical engineering smashed together. Boom, you're a human, go out and do things that are cool. And so I really wanted to be a developer on the way out. So that was what I wanted to do. I was dead set on it. I enjoyed software development, software architecture, the whole thing. But I graduated at a terrible time. The job market was delightful right at the recession. Ended up finding some work from a small company that had an in-house written application by like one or two people. They had both left. The app had gotten a new data set in, and the app was broken because of that new data set. And basically, they reached out to dice.com. I picked it up, and they interviewed me and said, "Hey, could you fix this app?" And I was like, "Sure." Didn't know what I was doing, but they needed somebody, so I hopped in. I fixed it, I think, in 2 days. Figured out the issue. They basically gave me the keys to the kingdom. I'm like, here's the documentation, i.e., like 3 paragraphs on what the app was and what servers it was on. I fixed it in 2 days, and they hired me the next day. So I fell into the job market into infrastructure, and basically led a small firm as they called me the computer engineer, but I was really the IT manager. So handled all the servers and storage and such. So I did the customer thing for a while and realized that infrastructure and using my developer skills, I could do really, really cool things and automate stuff. So that's really been the propulsion of me is, hey, infrastructure is awesome, but automating it is even better. So from there, I did a number of years on the customer side, and I jumped to a partner for a year. And now I've been at VMware for 3.5 years. Been a core solution engineer my entire time here. So I came in as a solution engineer, got promoted to senior in October of 2020. Then last July, I got promoted to staff. I'm here based out of Philadelphia. As you see below, I was a Philly VMUG leader for 5 years before jumping over to VMware, and then had to take that hat off, but I'm still very much involved there. I am a VMware Office of the CTO ambassador as of this year. I'm super excited about that. So first year there, I co-lead the CTEX and the VMUG initiatives through the Office of the CTO, which is, again, awesome. Hands-on lab captain. I do a whole bunch of stuff. It's all below. Things I'm interested in right now, blockchain. So if anybody on the call is not aware, VMware has a blockchain offering, and it's not like VMware Coin or something. It's the blockchain stuff behind what cryptocurrency would run on. So I'm diving into that currently. VMware IDEM is another awesome thing. It's a open source project that basically, the quickest way to say it is, I think the moniker out there is, it's not infrastructure as code, it's infrastructure as data. So this will be, the deck will be out there, so that link actually works, and it doesn't really help here. And I'm currently studying Japanese and German. So took Japanese in college, taught myself it as a kid for a while. So I'm rehydrating that over the past couple months. Just started learning German a little bit ago and having some fun with that. And I think I took more than my 2 minutes of allotted time here to rattle on about me. So hopefully everybody cared about anything I just said. But off to, I think, Ryan.
Ryan is next. Yeah. Tagging Ryan. There we go.
Mic check.
Works for me.
All right. So Ryan Conley, I'm a staff platform architect based out of San Francisco, or also just an SC. I started my IT career in 2002, working for a Mac-based school system. So for the Mac nerds out there, OS 9.2.2. That was my first IT gig, got into consulting, and then later moved to San Francisco to work for a hedge fund to help them virtualize their environment. Very much like Michael, I had to chuckle. I graduated in May of 09 from college, had a job offer in December of 08 that was pulled January 09. So I can relate to the job market. That's what led to me moving to South Carolina, where Andrew Miller is also from, and then later San Francisco. I've had a really fun career. My first team at VMware was actually working with Frances. I remember interviewing her. We had a lot of fun working for commercial customers in the San Francisco Bay Area. And then for the last 2 years, I've been an SE or platform architect on the modern app side. Similar to Michael, do a lot of fun stuff in the community. I'm the VMUG sponsor of San Francisco, also a code captain with Michael, also helped out with customer tech exchange and hands-on labs. So if you took the Tanzu for Developers Labs the last 12 months, that was my primary focus last year, and then did some help with the Tanzu for operators, and right now we're updating it. And then what I'm currently learning, I've been paying attention to machine learning. I kind of see that as the next wave, which then means I need to learn Python, which is where I lean on Michael, and then I'm studying for my CK.
Awesome. So Nick Korte, I am a staff solution engineer. I'm also a core solution engineer like Michael. So that makes me a technical generalist across the portfolio of VMware, right? I'm assigned to specific accounts in the U.S. Enterprise South. So I am the technical quarterback in those accounts. A little bit different than Ryan. He's more technically focused on the Tanzu items, but he's been there. He knows the way to go. So I actually started as a math major, and I became a math teacher right after college. Didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I was decent at math. I started teaching and found out I knew nothing about math and learned a ton, finally learned calculus. So I figured it'd be cool to do, a picture day theme here. These guys showed their pictures. So I can tell you, I was way cooler than those guys when I taught math. Way cooler. You can see I didn't even have a pocket protector because I wasn't that nerdy. I consider myself in the upper echelon of nerddom. Okay. And I'm sure that somebody probably has a question like, dude, why is your last name different? Right? That's kind of a glaring elephant in the room. So I actually never met my biological father until I was actually after I stopped teaching. And so we changed our last name to my biological father's last name so that my daughter, who's now 12, would have the name that, states where she came from. So I had the father who raised me, and then the father I met a little bit later, and it's worked out well, met a whole new family I didn't realize I had. So I went into defined benefits and learned SQL. That was kind of fun, and kind of wandered into an IT job after doing some statistics consulting. Ended up being the jack of all trades for a manufacturing company, did some PBX consulting on the side, and then moved into an HR services firm to rebuild the infrastructure on vSAN right before I came to VMware. So I went from the commercial segment to enterprise, which is just different kind of customers, bigger VMware footprints in the enterprise space. And you could see the community participation there, probably most notably I'm the co-host of the Nerd Journey podcast, where we focus on giving listeners the career advice we wish we'd been given earlier in our careers. I don't have a technical learning here, but I do love Audible, and I feel like I learn all kinds of stuff from books, focusing on biographies right now. Oh, and this is what I look like today. Look a little bit different. I don't have as many pens in my pocket there, so I don't have any.
Did you name those pens? That's a lot of pens.
That is a lot of pens.
Oh, it was pens and pencils, because in math you have to use pencil. It's just not good to use pen. It's kind of a crime.
So did you have a defined order that you always kept them in?
I did not have a defined order, to be honest with you, but I did prefer the mechanical pencil as opposed to the one you had to sharpen. I think 0.5 millimeter instead of 0.7 millimeter was my
them fighting words, man.
Yeah. It seemed like the 0.5 got harder to find at some point.
Nick, do you remember when we first met?
Oh yeah, We met at VMworld as part of the hackathon in 2017.
By VMware Code, that's right.
Yeah, it was really cool. It's fun thing to do. If you've never done a hackathon, you should totally do one. And you don't have to know anything about how to code, because I certainly didn't at the time.
What was our team name? Protectors of the Keystone?
Defenders of the Key Store.
All right.
I think
You were like 3 letters off, Ryan. I'll take it.
Yeah. So here's the interesting thing, gents. You know, we've all been generalists, right? Generalist, specialist. There's this big debate about, should I specialize? Should I stay generalist? Is my specialty really a specialty, or is it a generality? How do you feel, Michael, about staying a generalist?
Great question. And I know everybody says that when a question comes out. Great question. So you'll probably hear me say it 7 more times. But for me, let's unpack this a bit. So I guess to put a really fine wrapper on it, personally, I have ADHD, and the fact that I can specialize on multiple different things and context switch all day keeps me happy and excited. So the generalist role allows me to do that better than I think a specialist role would. I don't know if that's clearly not the answer I give generally, but I'm being very open and honest right now, right? The other thing about being a generalist that I enjoy, well, specifically, I guess a core SE, is I get to own the relationship with the customer. So whereas somebody, Ryan, I'll obviously let you comment on this, but somebody who's a specialist doesn't get to build that close relationship potentially with the customer base that they're working with. I really enjoy the interpersonal things, which is interesting, because if you ask me, what year is it, 2022? 10 years ago, if I would enjoy dealing with people, I would have told you to buzz off. I am an introvert at heart, like 100%. But I can throw on this extrovert sheen as much as I need to, and then at night when I come home, I take it off and like crash and pass out. But being a core SE allows me to build those relationships and have fun with the people side of things as opposed to just the tech. Obviously I'm a massive nerd. I can go into that all you want, but I do love the people side of things too.
And have you ever considered a specialty, Michael? And if you did, what would you pick?
I certainly have. So obviously, based on everything I've said during these, however long I've been rattling, I wanted to be a developer. So development was something that I have to scratch the itch every once in a while. So I have to come up with a new idea and build something small. That's just what I do. That's, again, part of the keeping me happy, keeping me whole as a human, as a technologist, I guess you could say. So yes, I've toyed with being a specialist. Obviously I gravitate towards Tanzu and the Tanzu portfolio, because that is the intersection of developers and infrastructure in my head. So I've put some thought and time and energy into it. But I just haven't made the jump yet. Right. So I've never put myself out there to say, hey, maybe I really should dive. I have a good thing going where I am right now. I'd like to believe, having a blast, having a lot of fun, still learning, still accelerating and excelling. So I'm currently not in the market to jump, or I guess that's not a good way to put it. But if the right thing came up, of course I would move. But right now I'm having a blast being a core SE.
Awesome. You mentioned something earlier that I want to dig into a bit. You said that being a generalist gives you the ability to specialize in things you want to. Do you think, and we'll ask Ryan the same in a second, what are your thoughts on I think that everybody develops some kind of specialty, even as a generalist. There are going to be areas where you find it to be more interesting, you're stronger, you spend more time there, you naturally gravitate towards certain types of projects and circumstances. What do you think?
I think it's a natural thing for you to gravitate towards something that you enjoy. I'm going to put a VMware lens on this because it's easy in what I'm about to say. We have a million products and a million things that we could specialize in, or anybody could specialize in. I have no idea if anybody on the call knows the number, but the amount of products that we have internally and different things it's in the hundreds. It's probably in the 100s, I would say. What's that?
200 plus.
Okay, there you go. Well, more than I even thought. So the fact is, there's going to be something that somebody is going to gravitate towards. In my head, it's a major, right? You have you have a major in something. That doesn't mean it's only thing you know. It's your major, right? Like it's like a university thing. So for me, well, I guess I should say, we at VMware also have a thing called solution disciplines, which is where you have to pick something. Neuron, I love it. Yes, there is only one product. We ignore everything else. Completely agree. We have a thing called solution disciplines where we need to focus on something, or where we're asked to focus on something, and you get to choose that and get really deep on that, which I think is awesome. But I don't know if I'm really answering the question, other than I can sum it up with, yes, you are always going to gravitate towards something. And the fact that VMware fosters that is exciting to me, because I get to pick my solution discipline and get deep on that, because that's going to lend itself to helping others grow as well, becoming a subject matter expert in your area.
Yeah, that's a great point. Now, Ryan, let's get your take on this, because you were once a generalist SE, much like Michael and myself. And what did you like about that generalist life?
So I'll walk it back and then walk it forward. So I joined VMware after being a systems admin for 13 years. And what I liked about joining VMware, and I was coming from what I thought was a VMware SME at the hedge fund, I was like, great, I don't have to worry about Cisco Call Manager. I don't have to go as deep into Microsoft Exchange and SQL, and I definitely don't have to be on call anymore. And then I walked in and I realized how much I didn't know. And that's a good thing. It's daunting, it's exciting, and that trend continues today. So one thing that I liked about being on the generalist is I could go learn whatever I wanted to learn. And I think that's the biggest, like the pro and the con about being in the IT field, is this stuff is always changing, particularly with the modern apps. And for me, I was very privileged to work in the Bay Area with some of the fastest growing startups in the country. And I had my bat line that I would call Patrick Kramer, for example. Him and I started together, and I would call him when I just was kind of pulling my hair out on something, because I was having to learn things he didn't have to, and he was having to learn things I didn't have to, and that was being driven by our customers. So my favorite thing about being a generalist, as Michael said, is you're very involved with your customers, even when you're a one-to-many, and you're building those relationships. The intent is to be a trusted advisor, not salesy, but just like, hey, you have a technical question, let's talk about it. So I really enjoyed that. But in terms of kind of what led me down the next path is, like, I figured out what my major was, to use Michael's words, which is I had to learn open source and cloud native apps early on, as it kind of rippled from the Bay Area, and that led to me wanting to focus on that. And then the same thing happened all over again. I thought I could just narrow my focus from the 200 plus VMware solutions to just on what is now the Tanzu brand, and even it's daunting. The open source community, there's a new project every week, but it's fun.
And I think you hit on something really important there, Ryan, is that even in a quote specialty area, even where you are, it's still pretty big. So you might actually be perceived as a specialist by people like Michael and me, and or our customers. Our customers may actually perceive Michael and myself as VMware experts, even though we're generalists, right? Because we're their point of contact on the technical side. But even for you, Ryan, like, you might classify someone else who specializes in Tanzu, like Naran, right? Tanzu Service Mesh, he would be a specialist in that. So I think there are layers of the specialty I think it has to do with the way we classify it. That's just my theory.
And the good and bad about that is there's always a smarter person, and that's someone you can learn from, like Naran. And I just try and focus on what I need to know. So particularly when we would have a new SE join the team, and sometimes they're pulling their hair out, my advice to them was, like, focus on what you need to know, and then focus on what you want to learn. And sometimes there's overlap there, sometimes there's not. But know what you need to know to get your job done, and then keep pursuing what you want to learn.
Can I say something? Because you mentioned my name.
Absolutely.
You gave me a compliment that I wouldn't take. I I was a specialist for all my career at VMware until like last year that I became a product manager, which is like, I would say the ultimate specialty because I'm a product owner. But I was a specialist all time. The reason I was very good at being a specialist is because I always felt that if I have too much of a prolonged relationship with a customer on a daily basis, they start noticing that I'm, that I'm not very good at like long-term relationships on a daily basis, and it's gonna go haywire. But coming in, for a one-off. And I would do the relationship things. I mean, the reason I became a principal is because I was very good at having those relationships with customers, but not on a daily basis, right? Now, what you guys call as generalist, I consider as a quarterback in a football game. Because if you think of all the specialists, the people that come in on specific areas, as wide as and narrow as they may be, they're focused on those specific areas. And the person that needs to advocate for the customer and needs to understand what the customer need and place the different roles in the right place. That would be what we call core, or generalist, the way we want to call it. And it's just like a quarterback. It's like, this is the play, this is what you do. I found that folks that are what you call generalist and don't understand, they bring in specialists and don't understand, like in a general idea, what the specialty is about, they find themselves in a situation where the technology is driven the conversation with the customer and not the customer requirements. So you really got to understand the customer, got to understand what the specialists do, and then make sure that the right people and the right technology is coming into the place. And I have a full admiration for folks that do that. Like I was always zoomed into one specific thing, hitting it home, and moving on to the next thing.
Well said. I agree.
Yeah, well said. And you hit on something else. Maybe it's personal preference about how you like to construct your day to day and whether you want the close relationships or you don't. I like that. Appreciate it. And I think, this relates back to somebody who's a customer too. If you're working the help desk or your systems administrator trying to fix a problem, being able to know what the true issue is or what someone on the other side is experiencing, if you need to go to the next tier of support or help your specialist, right? Whether it's from a vendor or someone else in your company, you need to know what the real problem is so that person can be effective and quarterback the solution. It's a great point.
During this chat, somebody mentioned being a trusted advisor, and that's what, in my mind, a generalist, a core SE, whatever you want to call us, is just trying to become that person. The other day, I had a customer reach out and say, "Hey, I have this question about Active Directory. Can you help?" I'm like, "Heck yeah, I can help." That's clearly not my role, even in the slightest. Like, I shouldn't be having that conversation. But the fact is, I know enough about what they were looking to do, and I helped them out. And so that, when it comes to just relationship building and helping people become who they want to be and what they need to do, if you are seen as that person who can make that happen, whether it's technology or finding the right person who knows the technology or just finding the right person that knows something, that's what I see this role as. And the quarterback analogy is perfect, right? Like, I always say I'm the technical tip of the spear when it comes to VMware. Like, there's a million people and arrow behind me. I'm just the very, very point. I'm the first thing you see.
Yeah, a great point. Now,
on me saying that I'm a great point.
Yes, you are a great point at the tip of the spear, and you did make a great point at the same time. Ryan, were there any challenges you didn't foresee making the transition from generalist to specialist that you can share?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, Francis had a good session before, which is time management. So I think I personally need to kind of readjust my system and level up there. There was also an expectation that just didn't prove to actually be true, which is like, I thought I would be trained specifically on items, and we do get some training, but the reality is it's each person's customer base is still different, just like in a generalist SE role, as well as your own level is different than your peer. So someone may be able to very quickly pick up something or a topic. And so you combine that with what I mentioned, which I thought I could walk in and have a narrow band, but the reality is the portfolio, even on the Tandu side, is so massive between the data side, developer experience side, and now the operations side. So that was a challenge I wasn't expecting. So much so that even on my team, we actually kind of have sub-majors, if you will.
I think a lot of people feel that specialists make more money by default. In the industry, as you've observed, can you comment on that? Is developing a specialty something that will actually make me more money, whether I'm on a vendor, partner, customer?
Generally, I would say it depends on. I think a good rule of your career is to focus and kind of learn and be the subject matter expert in the item that the person either next to you or your team doesn't want to learn. That's kind of what led me down my VMware journey, is just kind of focusing on, like, we have a problem, I'm going to solve it, and I'll share the knowledge. I think in that case, if you are able to allow yourself to stand out, that will lead to ideally higher pay, or at least a better gig that you're just more happy. You're just happier doing. Yeah, there's a couple of ways that you could look at that. So I pause because on some cases you could just be, tip of the spear in a brand new technology, and that leads to immaturity in the portfolio, like the actual technical bits, whether it be open source or not, as well as it's typically a lot of work to get the deals. And so we are partially commissioned, 75-25. So in that case, if you're just tied to a single sales rep and you all aren't selling much, then that's going to lead to a lower kind of overall pay. But SE life aside, I think if you're focused on learning new technology and you're able to lead, and so I mentioned machine learning because I'm looking at that as kind of the next wave, just as containers brought in the current wave, I think you're going to be more valuable in the market.
I would add on to that, don't get too specific and then not be willing to change. I've seen that happen too, where somebody, you're like, I want to get focused on that. And then that's all you want to learn. You don't want to pivot outside. And that is a recipe for disaster.
Like blockchain?
We'll see.
Just don't fall off the blockchain.
Right.
But that's a good point, Michael. And I wonder if people fear not being able to go back to being a generalist once they specialize, even if it's only for a short time. Do you gents have any opinions on whether that makes it more difficult for me to go back to the generalist life than before? Because I've seen people go in both directions.
I think for me, I'm currently still trying to, Neuron was someone I admired and kind of keep as a high bar. Him making both principal, which is what I'm pursuing, and then he even went up the staff to field technology. And for me, that is like keeping my foot on the accelerator. So I got to keep learning, keep sharing what I learn, and just leveling up my peers, keep us all swimming in the same direction. And so for me, that isn't to say you cannot do that as a generalist, but what I'm currently passionate about is technology in general. That's why I'm not on the sales side. And the technology that I'm passionate about is just, it gravitates towards these newer style applications. And that's where machine learning is interested in me, but been playing around with Docker and Kubernetes for many years now. That's interesting to me. It's also just so much to not get bored.
Yeah. Every now and then I feel the struggle of, I just don't feel like I'm deep enough in X, whatever that topic is. I want to go deeper, and you only have so much time, as Francis and others alluded to. So you can only go so deep, and that's why you have the specialists. So, yeah.
It's daunting and exciting all at the same time. A great book
sure
on that is, empathy. So you're not alone. We're all on this journey together.
And if anybody out there has not read Range by David Epstein about why generalists triumph in a specialized world, it's fantastic. Highly recommend.
We're just going to have a book club at the end of this. I like
We are. We should have collected all the recommendations, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say this one. This is one of my next books on empathy that I'm gonna read.
Nice.
Love it.
But I did buy this one too. I just haven't read it yet.
Well, you know, one of the atomic habits that managers need is empathy. So let's talk about that. Are you executing like a boss as an individual contributor, or maybe you are the boss? Have you ever wanted to be the boss? Every one of us, Ryan, Michael, and myself, are individual contributors. So, gents, what do you like about the individual contributor path, and what keeps you there?
Yeah, good question. For me, at the hedge fund, at the end of my tenure, I was actually informally running the team. And I don't know how to motivate people. Like, I spark the passion to do your job. Like, why are you 10 minutes late every day? So the idea of just managing people, and actually I'll restate that. I don't want to manage people, I want to lead people. And that's, I choose leadership. That's a word I respect. My wife's an excellent leader. I've had some excellent leadership at VMware. And I'm just passionate about technology. And so I'm not passionate about teaching people, leading people yet. We'll see if that changes later on. Right now, I'm still passionate about learning tech, trying to be the tip of the spear, to use Michael's words, and then sharing that, but not dealing with performance reviews. Always happy to help with the interview, but I don't want to be in charge of hiring, firing.
How about you, Michael?
Yeah, I've got a long story here, right? So I've gone back and forth several times over the years of whether or not I go into I hate to say management, right? It's really leadership, but there's two parts of leadership. There's people leadership, and then there's the whatever else leadership, just being somebody that likes to help others. Again, I said it earlier, become who they want to be, right? So just be that person that people want to follow. So when I first jumped in the job market, I certainly, if I think on my first interview, I was like, what do you want to be in 5 years? The dumb question that we all get on interview. I'm positive I said management, positive, because that's what I thought was a good thing to say. As I've gone through my career and done things, I've toyed with the leadership, the management side of the house several times. Applied for it, I think twice, missed by this much on both occasions. And the feedback I've gotten both times was, you didn't do much wrong. You nailed it. Just they did one thing better. I'm like, oh, okay. So a lot of it for me right now is, and I've gotten some feedback like, you'd be a great manager. I've had people say that to me. I'd love to work for you. And it's like, that's a huge compliment. I just don't know when to do it or why or what. So I'm at the point where I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. And I say that with full foot on the ground. I'm having a blast doing what I'm doing. For me, it comes down to sphere of influence. And right now I'm able to expand my sphere of influence being an individual contributor here in Warminster, Pennsylvania. In my little bubble here in my office with all my Pearl Jam stuff behind me, I see my sphere of influence growing. And it's incredibly, I don't even know what to say. It's awesome. It's a really dumb word, but I love that I can help people become who they want to be sitting here in my chair, and I don't have to hire or fire them. So for me, it's, again, will I ever go into leadership management? Sure. One day, maybe. But for now, I'm having a blast doing what I'm doing.
You touched on something. Oh, go ahead, Ryan.
And also what's happening in the open source community, but VMware has always had a track for individual contributors, and that's something. Francis had a good clip. You and Michael have your clips of like your career journey. Mine's the same. Being able to continue to grow in our career. So it's great to have many options to stay as an individual contributor and not be kind of gated by being forced to go into management. And if you look at the software development community, that's very much representative as well. You can work your way up, still be a senior, and have a wide influence and share knowledge without having to go into management. And then now you see like developer advocacy roles. And so it's nice that I feel the culture in today has changed than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago, where when I was at the hedge fund, we had 2 individual contributors and 1 manager, and that was it.
Yeah, it was a similar story for me when I worked at the manufacturing company. There was my boss and the CFO, and there were two guys that worked the help desk, and I wasn't really their manager so much as managing the help desk and assigning work, kind of more of a supervisory position. And while I enjoyed helping them and teaching them how to grow technically in areas that I might have known better than them, I I have an interesting story where both ended up having to leave the company within 10 days of one another. And it was not fun. And I've always remembered that. And much like you, gents, I don't really want to be in charge of hiring, firing, performance reviews, salary bumps, and, all that stuff that comes along with it. Now, you could look at that differently, certainly. Instead of fearing it, maybe you embrace it. And I've heard managers say that, or people leaders, right, people who are people managers in whatever field, say that they really enjoy getting to give someone the opportunity to do something new or something that excites them. So hopefully, if you are a manager out there listening, or a leader, you are looking for ways to help your team succeed and want to develop them. And in this job market, the way it is and the way COVID's impacted it, my hope is that the smaller companies will develop more tiers, and a clearer progression path for the individual contributor. Because in a lot of cases, to move up, right, whether it's from a salary title perspective, you might have to move to a larger company. And if you're at a large company that doesn't have, super defined tiers, maybe moving into an adjacency or specialty within that company, different team is the way to go. It's just my thought.
Yeah.
Here's something to ponder, gents. Does going into management prevent you from moving back to individual contributor?
I vote no. And maybe that could be the individual company and their culture, but I would hope if it's just not right, you have a way to drop down, if that's even the right term, or a way to pivot, I guess. There's going to be times where you should persevere, and then there's going to be times where, like, some people, for example, are absolutely stellar individual contributors, but either they themselves or sometimes their managers in a friendly setting be like, you're just not, and they'll be like, yeah, I'm not. And I would be that person, be like, I don't want to manage people. I don't know how to motivate them. I understand the need for TPS reports. We have to validate what we do in some form of accountability and metrics, but I don't want to grill someone to do their TPS reports.
How about you, Michael? What do you think?
Again, the best and worst answer in the world, and in IT specifically, it depends. So for me, it really comes down to the person and what they want their resume to look like, right? So there's a couple ways I can state this and kind of frame it up. Let me peel this back a little bit, actually. In your career, you should have a guiding star of, like, I want to do that. Yeah. The path might be like this to get to that, but in my mind, it's like, you got to have that guiding star. You should also have separate resumes for that guiding star to get you where you want to go, right? So if there were a situation, this is purely hypothetical, clearly, if you got promoted or you went for a leadership position, people leadership position, you got it, it goes well, and then it doesn't, and you change back to individual contributor, that should not be viewed as a negative. That should be viewed as a piece of your career. But on the hand of recruiters, that might look like a bad thing. So does it inhibit somebody from going back and having that be a bump or a boon? Sure, it can, right? It can certainly look bad, but if you frame it properly as part of your growth, it is 100% not a bad thing. So again, it's all about, it depends. And you can spin that depends into whatever you want. In my opinion, it's one of those things, right? Like, if it can always be a positive if you spin it to be a positive.
Yeah, and I think it goes well with this slide too. Like, are you like a boss, or are you the boss yourselves? And in some cases, we need to be the boss of our own career. one thing that I liked about VMware leadership is I never had a one-on-one, much less a regular cadence one-on-one, and then a quarterly cadence on career progression. And so it allowed me to essentially craft a North Star for what worked with me at the time, in some cases long-term, short-term, and then start having the conversation with my manager on like, hey, I want to make senior. What will it take to make senior? Then I got a feedback loop on senior. What will it take to make staff after I got senior? What, I want to keep driving towards principal. And so that's where I've been able to have like regular career conversations. But that's up to me. Like I have to set the stage and the expectations with my management, then ask for feedback. What can I do better, etc.
You mean you didn't just have those discussions at your yearly evaluation, Ryan?
No, but I learned that my first SE manager at VMware, Jeff Eberhard, who you've interviewed on your show, but that was something he taught me, and it's something I try and implement. And then my wife is a leader now of many people, and so I've applied the advice she's given me on how to kind of manage my conversations.
Yeah,
it's kind of an offshoot here, but I've done another talk recently, specifically on brand building. And one thing that I put my foot down as hard as I can and say is ask. If there's something you want to do, if there's somewhere you want to go, if there's anything that you need, just ask. People do not know what you want. They don't know. They will only know if you tell them. And so I've made a big habit of asking potentially when I shouldn't ask, like ask things right up front. People are like, whoa, why are you asking that right now? It's like, hey, I'm setting the stage that this is what I'm aiming towards.
I like
it's one of those things where it feels super uncomfortable at first. There's no doubt it will. But it has yet to backfire for me. It's you set the stage for yourself.
Yeah. I heard once at a marriage seminar that anger is the result of unmet expectations. So I like the idea of setting the expectations up front. And I have told my daughter multiple times, don't assume that I know. Don't assume that I know. Like, you need to assume that I don't know. Just tell me. Tell me what it is you're wanting here. And it's not playing dumb. It's really like trying to understand. I like that. And I think, I can't speak from my own experience on this, but we've interviewed a lot of people on Nerd Journey who went into leadership. There were some people who went into it and hated it. Like Ethan Banks, thought he'd be great at it, hated it. There are people like Andrew Miller, who was on earlier today, right? He was on the show recently, and he actually kind of wandered into people leadership at two different companies. And then he went back to being an individual contributor in what he does today at Pure Storage. So it's not like there's no pathway back. Some people didn't expect to become leaders, but got feedback that they should, like Charlie Nickel, for example, a former boss of mine. He was told that he definitely needed to go into leadership and ended up really enjoying it. That's still what he does today. So as you mentioned, Michael, it depends. There are a lot of different perspectives out there that you can get. And I would say, if you don't know, talk to people, and hopefully your manager is someone who can give you advice. Quick poll of the audience. How many people are individual contributors? Show me a hand raise in Zoom.
I see at least 3, 4.
Okay. Seeing more. Okay. You don't have to answer out loud, but hopefully you are having one-on-ones with your manager consistently. Back to what Ryan said, that's not something that I had consistently experienced before coming to my job at VMware. It's something that I experience now and again, or usually if there was something that my boss needed me to do. We didn't have a lot of, through no fault of their own. It's just, it wasn't happening as much as I would like it to be. So hopefully if you aren't having those conversations, you can ask for them. Any questions from the audience? I feel like we talked a lot. Anybody want to unmute, ask a question, throw something in chat? Something we can try to answer for you.
Nick, on that topic of the one-on-one discussions, I've been at jobs before where I have one-on-ones, and it's just the one-on-one is my manager telling me things that I did wrong. And now I'm in a role where I have weekly one-on-ones with my supervisor, and he ends the meeting by asking, "What can I do for you?" And that's a huge difference. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Such a difference when there's a person on the other end of the phone and not.
Yeah, exactly.
Love that attitude. That's great. We need more people leaders with attitudes like that. That's great. And it sounds like in your case, Ben, in order to resolve the issue of what you wanted, you had to move to a different place.
Yes, and sometimes it comes from I changed jobs last year, and I was working for someone who I used to work under before at a previous job. He was a director, so he hired me in a role here. And he really didn't have that many one-on-ones with me. I don't know if it's because he felt he knew me already, but then we had a little bit of a reorg, and I got moved under a supervisor, and this guy is just a much different. Like, there's different managers out there. There's people that manage in different ways, and you definitely see it when you move from role to role and working from person to person.
Yeah, 100%. Anybody else? Questions, comments?
Keep an eye on the chat too.
I hope you'll take what Ryan said to heart about you owning the agenda for those one-on-one conversations, because you really do. Hey, I want to talk about X, because the manager is going to come, your boss is going to come with some things that they want to talk about. And you should come with some things that you want to talk about that aren't always like, okay, here's where I am on these 10 projects, boss person, and I need to update you, or I need you to unblock me on these 3 things so we can buy this hardware or software. Keep the career aspect in mind too. Let's do last question, and then we'll end it here. How about, what do you do or have you done to decrease stress in a world of much technology? And
you do it, Ryan.
So I'm a little behind right now, but one thing that we started doing, we moved about 1.5 years ago, was just daily walks. And otherwise, you work from home 5 days straight. Like, I stand on a standing pad, but otherwise I don't get any exercise. And so that mental break, and then cutting my teeth in IT for so long, I have very little screen time. Like, I close my lid, system shutdown complete, and I do my best to avoid computers. I still have my phone on me at times and watch TV from time to time, but I do my best to just, I have work during the day, and then I do anything but computers at night and on the weekends.
Nice.
I'm very much I have a 6, a 4, and a 2-year-old, and I'm going to do whatever they're going to do, because they both stress and de-stress me at the same time. So it's really, I follow what they want to do. So we do a lot of the park. They're super duper into music right now, which is amazing. And again, you can probably all tell that I enjoy music as well. So I don't want to say indoctrinate, because that's a terrible word, but they do seem to like some of the same stuff I do, which makes me happy. So for me, it's really my kids. And yes, getting outside is a big piece of that. If they didn't go outside, they would never sleep, I'm convinced.
On the funny note, because it said you're studying Japanese and German, which I'm sure are very similar and easy to learn. Early into the pandemic, and the weekends, we make brunch, and I normally just do coffee, and then I don't have anything till lunch, but we'll do brunch, which is, I don't normally eat breakfast. That's a difference. Cooking with my wife is super fun. But then we were doing French for an hour every Saturday. And then one random day we decided to try Russian, which is nowhere near as easy. If you want to laugh, try that.
The Japanese, for me, just to put a bow on that. So I kind of said, I taught myself. All right, we want to hear how nerdy Michael is. So my dad had been to Japan 30 times when I was a kid through work. I went once when I was 10, and it was like, I was like, this is the coolest place in the entire world. And then in 6th grade, when Pokemon came out on Game Boy, I was super duper into red and blue, because my buddy and I were into it. And then I said, hey, I want to play gold and silver before they come out in the US. So I imported it and started to teach myself Japanese. So that was my foot into teaching myself Japanese. I took it in college and I didn't have to study. So apparently I taught myself enough for Japanese 1 and 2, which is insane. And I haven't used it in years, like a very long time. About 2 or 3 months ago, I picked up Duolingo and I'm like, let's see what this crap's all about. Popped open Japanese, and it's so much fun to just get it to rehydrate my brain into that. And the German, I'm German by heritage, Irish, German, Russian. I'm a little bit of everything. But German's one thing I've always wanted to learn. And I started Duolingo German the other day, and it's been fun. It's a totally different part of my brain than Japanese, because Japanese, the sentence structure is different, the character set's different. So you're doing multiple things, and I can listen to it and tell you what I think it says. German, it's like you just transpose to English, as far as I'm like the structure seems to be much more Englishy because we're a Germanic language. So it's funny. I can feel different parts of my brain being flexed when I do the different languages. I'm having a blast with that.
Nice. I like going for walks. I find that when you have days of piles of work with no end in sight, getting outside and trying to not respond to texts or IMs or take phone calls, but maybe listen to a podcast, listen to an audiobook, or don't listen to anything and just let your mind do that deep work and spin on something, and it'll probably solve a problem you're trying to solve for yourself. I find the fresh air, if I miss a day, I notice, especially if it's super busy. Another thing I started doing was something called morning pages. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the concept, but you basically write by hand 3 pages. You can do it at any time of the day, but I try to do it first thing in the morning before I start. You just dump your brain out, whatever you want to write about. It may sound daunting. I can't write 3 pages. Yeah, you can. You can dump out whatever you're thinking for 3 pages, and it's brought some clarity. I've only been doing it for about 5 or 6 weeks, but if I don't do it first thing in the morning, I notice.
That's super interesting, because when I pick up a pen, I'm like, oh my God, I forgot how to write letters, because I just don't do it often enough. Maybe if I start to do that, it won't feel weird to pick up a pen.
Maybe. And I mean, part of the exercise is the writing by hand, and that helps empty the brain. You know, I haven't studied tremendously about it, but it's cool. Makes me want to write more, like blog more, but again, time, right?
That's awesome. I love it.
Any other questions for us?
This was great, guys. I enjoyed it a lot.
Well, great.
Thanks for having us.
On your part, Ben, too. It seemed like all the sessions aligned well. So,
yeah, and that was, to be brutally honest, like,
don't say it.
Really
it was
wasn't.
intentional. It was intentional.
It really was. Like, I went and VMUG has this list of community sessions, and I just went and picked, and like I wasn't trying to do something like a professional development type of event, but it just kind of fell together that way, and it was awesome. I have to say, like, sometimes going, just changing jobs and moving company to company is beneficial. My girlfriend worked for an educational software company, and their management style was just so abrupt, and like everyone was afraid to ask for stuff, because if you asked and it wasn't the right question, you got in trouble for it, and stuff like that. And now she's in a new job and a new role, and it's just a completely different environment, and she's kind of like suffering from. She was at that other job for over 5 years, and she's got like this PTSD almost, that she's just not used to being able to go to her manager and say, this really isn't working for me. Can you give me more information, or who can help me, or anything like that? And
you said PTSD almost. That is PTSD, right? Like,
it totally is. Yeah.
Right. The things like that are core memories that affect you. 100% PTSD, right?
Yeah.
I'm not laughing as a joke. It's like, jobs can be bad. I'll put it that way. They can be bad for your mental health, for your physical health, for everything. And when you change to a good one that actually supports you and you being a human, it's huge, huge.
Yeah. This was awesome. And Michael, it was good seeing you again. We haven't seen each other in a while.
It's been a minute, Ben. Yeah. So the last time I presented here, like, again, I don't even know what year it is anymore. I think it was September of 2020. It's been a minute. So yeah, as always.
I'm trying to think when the VMware Event Broker client session was. That had to have been at least a year or two.
Yeah, but it was all during the pandemic that I met you. You other guys, I mean, Michael, I've known you through VMUG for years now.
It's probably close to 10 at this point.
I was kicking myself for not going to the Philly UserCon.
It was fun
last week. I should have gone. I missed it because like when and you know, because you've been a leader, when you attend a UserCon as a VMUG leader, it's hard to go to sessions because you're also expected to spend time. Like VMUG usually has a table for the leaders to sit at to interact with the community, and like I like to go from sponsor to sponsor in the exhibit hall, just for one, to meet and see what the different sponsors are doing. It also helps me to find new sponsors for my local events like this. So
totally get it. I mean, I said this at the UserCon about 300 times. It was the first Philly UserCon that I didn't have a responsibility at in, I think, 9 or 10 years. And it was super weird to just exist there. It was great.
Yeah.
It was great. Awesome. I got to be just a normal person at an event.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's why I used to go to Philly. I'd be able to attend it as a user and go to sessions. And
that's why I used to come up to Paris. Same thing. Yeah. It was like I still got there. I was like, all right, how can I help? But I can't turn that off. But yeah, I hear you. Going as a person is tough.
I'm hoping to be able to go to VMware Explorer this year. So we'll see.
You just let me know, man.
What's that?
You just let me know. First round on me.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely reach out.
As a 10-year resident, there's a lot of things I would recommend and a lot of things I would not recommend. Leave your hotel.
Do espresso shots with Ryan.
Yeah, I've been to. I mean, what are your guys' thoughts on the name change from VMworld to VMware Explorer?
My first impression is Dora the Explorer, but it's definitely needed. I've already gotten internal call for papers just opened up. I'm going to do a couple of session submissions with customers, and very little of it will be VM focused. I acknowledge a lot of customers have both. Very few are lucky enough to even start with a greenfield app, much less a greenfield environment. But so much of what we do now is security, and in my space, security is very relevant with the modern app side of the house. So I welcome it. It's a little bit of a the brand. Like, I'm a longtime alumni, but
yeah, it's hard to see that change. But hopefully it'll still be a valuable experience for anybody that attends this year. You know, and if you were thinking about submitting something for the call for papers before, don't let that preclude you from submitting this year.
Yeah. And keep your eyes peeled. DevOps Loop will not be the day before. It's going to be its own event. So you'll hear more about that soon.
DevOpsLoop.io, I think, is the site, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Thank you.
And I know a few people that were a little upset that they got rid of the alumni status. So everyone's starting over again at year one. And people that have been to so many of them, it's not like you got anything extra for being an alumni, really, except for a little notation on your badge. But
and I stand corrected. It looks like the DevOps page is updated. So June 22nd. Keep it on your calendar. Registration opens in about 2 weeks, May 10th.
Nice. All right, awesome. Anyone have any questions for Nick, Ryan, or Michael? Feel free to unmute yourself, post in the chat, smoke signals, whatever.
I only accept carrier pigeon.
No.
You beat me to it.
What about semaphore? Who has the flags?
Yeah, right.
And we accept any and all feedback, even if you didn't like it. So
yeah,
no worries. It's not going to hurt our feelings.
100% true. I'm an open book, right? If you didn't like it, please let me know and let us know. And the other side of that open book is when Ben puts out the slides, hit me up on Twitter, hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat always.
Yeah, same.
And a key point about career is technical too. So if I think all of us are now veterans to the New Jersey VMUG, so I have to come back and do a more technically focused session. So, but the floor is yours. What do you want to see?
Well, this session was awesome. I thought it was very insightful to hear from all three of you guys, and to see you each have different career paths, and how you guys ended up where you are. I thought that's always stuff like that's always cool to see.
I didn't even know Nick and I went to the same college. Now I do.
Small world, eh?
Yeah.
All right, cool.